Chamber in the Guildhall Tuesday, the 6th of June at 4 o'clock. Alderman Breslin.
Here, John.
Alderman Cook. Alderman Hussey.
Aye.
Councillor Boggs.
Shot.
Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Duffy, Sandra Duffy.
John.
Councillor Farrell. Councillor Harkin. Councillor Heaney.
Shot.
Councillor Jackson.
Shot.
Councillor McGinley.
Shaw.
Councillor Mooney. Councillor O'Farrell. And Councillor Tierney. Thank you, members. Back to you, Chair.
John. So that brings us on to the broadcasting statement. I would like to remind everyone present at this meeting in the Guildhall that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting and training purposes, and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak, and a copy of the Council's privacy notice may be found on the Council website. Item 4 is declarations of members' interests. Members can declare now or at any point throughout the meeting if they have an interest to declare. So we'll move forward. Item 5 is our deputation, and it's to receive Alison Allen, Chief Executive, and Councillor Mac Yard from NILGA, President-elect, to brief members on the activities and benefits of membership of the Northern Ireland Local Government Association. I think that Matt's going to do the introduction. Is that right, Alison? Aye. So I'll pass over to Matt, and then you can do your presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions.
All right, Gurma Ogat, and listen, thanks very much for inviting me along today. You can all see I'm not present with you. Unfortunately, I'm down in Belfast, and congratulations on everyone last night in their AGM and all the positions. We're currently in Belfast. We had our AGM last night, so we're in the same position as you. But I'm here obviously to speak to you today and highlight the importance of engaging with your local government association, which is NILGA. You know, I have this policy in the first year whenever I'm chairing that I'm completely open to any members across any of the parties to engage me and talk to me about any of the workings of NILGA and how we can work for you to advocate for your area. And, you know, we're all councillors. I'm a councillor and have been for some time, and we're the most visible and accessible faces as elected representatives in our area. You're the community activists, you're the leaders, you live in the villages, the townlands and the urban areas, and you represent your local communities. You give them a voice and you defend their interests in the council chamber. So as the local government association, NILGA wants to add their voices to your representation and to amplify the needs of the constituents that you represent and yourselves at a regional level. And to do that, we actually need very strong support of representation right across the north and right across all of the councils. And from your own perspective in your own area, by participating in NILGA, you can give the Northwest a voice on matters that affect the sustainability and the performance of your council. And so you can maximise these opportunities for the Northwest to create thriving, prosperous and a sustainable city and district with equality of opportunity for everybody. And whether that be through your city deal, the cross-border work that you do with Donegal to create a powerhouse for the Northwest, best practice in environmental protection, developing opportunities at McGee and digital, life, health and sciences and research. That's what NILGA is here for, to add that voice to what you are trying to achieve in your council. I've been on the officer board of NILGA now for 5 years, and I've seen at first hand how cross-party work at a regional level is contributing to sustainability of the local government sector. And a few examples of that would be representing local government on council finances, the levelling up and the shared prosperity funds, providing training for councillors to be the best advocate for their communities, and developing campaigns to highlight the work the councils are doing And 5 years ago, whenever I came into Nilga, I did not see that. I didn't see the collaboration and the impact that it would have. But I learned very quickly that when we found ourselves in COVID, the impact that Nilga had in terms of lobbying and engaging at assembly level to try and free up resources and finances for council was very, very worthwhile. And it showed me the role that Nilga played. So all of these things have been delivered and advocated for by Nilga for the benefit of all councils and all communities. Alison is there with you, and Alison will now bring you through exactly what Nilga does and the opportunities that you have to influence all of the decisions that you're going to make. So I'm very happy to be here and open it up for you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt, and really delighted to be here and lovely to see some familiar faces, and I look forward to getting to know some of the new councillors over the coming years as well. My name's Alison Allen. I'm the newly appointed Chief Executive of Nilga. I say that, so I reckon that's good for 2 years, even though I've been in the job for about 16 months. So it's very much been a learning curve for me, but I rely very much on the wider Nilga team, and I have Lisa O'Kane, who is my Head of Impact. So Lisa will be a familiar face to you for the next mandate, because our job is to deliver for you as the owners and, in effect, shareholders of Nilga. And with your permission, Chair, I'll run you quickly through some of the key activities of Nilga and then just highlight potential future direction. And obviously, I know you're in the process in the coming weeks of making your appointments to Nilga, and you will obviously be involved in shaping that direction. So we look forward to that engagement. You can see there on the slide just a very quick summary of the kind of the Nilga activities. And I suppose moving on to the next slide there, I want to take you through some detail around those individual activities. And very, very prominent for you, obviously, in Derry City and Strabane is our work around workforce. So in Nilga, we know that our council staff are our most important asset in the sector, and we have been developing a very strong regional voice as we represent at national employers level alongside the joint negotiating committees with England and Wales. And as our conversations with you have developed as political representatives, we have realised that it's important to make sure that this is not a race to the bottom when it comes to council staff pay. And we have been advocating very strongly in relation to making sure that fair offers are made to staff, because without the council staff, the organisations and the corporate body and indeed the work doesn't function properly. So we're really strong on that, and have been particularly strong in the last 12 months, given the difficulties in industrial relations we've had across the region. But more importantly, you don't want the consequence of that to feel that staff aren't valued for the role that they deliver. During those difficulties as well, Nilga was able to bring all of the HR directors and leads together on quite a frequent basis, actually, at one point. And Paula from your team was very proactive in that. And that was to ensure the councils were able to share information and to coordinate and collaborate as well as a region, as well as supporting the work that you do locally within your own district. And just hot off the press today, we have just had word that on the National Pay Award, you obviously will be aware that all 3 trade unions have rejected that award. Unite are issuing ballot papers to all councils, so all memberships. So obviously Northern Ireland councils would be affected by that. Those papers on their way. If they haven't received your workforce, been received by your workforce, already, they should be in the next few days. And you'll be aware that our trade union laws are slightly different. There is no turnout threshold. So the ballot is being conducted on a disaggregated basis, exactly as the same situation last year, which means it'll be council by council. So it really will be if your workforce in Derry City and Strabane, or indeed any of the other councils, decide to vote for industrial action. And obviously we will support our HR colleagues and the chief executives in trying to coordinate the region through that as well. And hopefully it doesn't come to strike action, because we all know that there are actions short of strike action that can be taken. But I just thought it would be useful to let you know that kind of hot off the press from this morning. As we move forward to elected member development, I have to say the participation from Derry City and Strabane in our regional learning and development programme for councillors has been absolutely super. So there in the last mandate, 19 members of this council went through some either formal accredited or non-accredited learning and development opportunities with Nilga. And the purpose of that is to help you be the most effective and confident councillor in your role as scrutinising and challenging for the benefit of your citizens. Councillor John Boyle has sat on the Elected Member Development Network, which is basically where councillors lead this work. So this isn't driven by officers, it is you yourselves as elected representatives determine what your priorities should be in learning development. And he has been a very, very vocal voice for the needs of councillors in Derry City and Strabane, and been very ably supported by Sharon Maxwell and your team as well. And we have had also very proactive involvement from this council in the Peace 4 monitoring committees and the Peace 4 steering committees. And in the process of reconstituting NILGA over the next couple of weeks, we'll be making appointments from the NILGA membership to the Peace Plus monitoring committees and scrutiny committees, which is obviously massively important for this particular region. Membership of that committee will involve actually assessing and making awards on applications. So really keen to encourage representation from Derry City and Strabane to put your names forward for participation in those, given the sheer volume of resources that are available to local authorities. And on a very, very positive note, I'm pleased to say Derry City and Strabane was the first council to secure the Charter Plus accreditation, which is recognition of the standards that your council has for elected member learning and development themselves beyond the regional support that we do. So obviously that was a real trailblazing exercise for this council, really showing that the real commitment to your learning and development as well as the learning and development of officers. So on policy, many of you may know my colleague Karen Smith, who has been in the organisation for quite some time, who leads in our policy activities. But just it would be I'd be here till tomorrow describing all of the activity, but some highlights for us, which I think are particularly probably interesting to you. In relation to planning, we know that there are difficulties for you and how the planning system operates, particularly around the bureaucracy associated with local development planning. So as a local government association for you, we have been lobbying very hard with the department, along with our colleague chief executives, in making sure that some of that bureaucracy is addressed as quickly as is possible, and that when your plans are submitted at each stage, that the department is not taking 6 months, 9 months or even a year to respond to your submissions, because I know you're all very keen to have that local planning policy in place to supplement the regional policy. Additionally, we gave evidence on your behalf to the Public Accounts Committee as a result of the Northern Ireland Audit Office report into the planning system, particularly putting to bed queries about conflicts of interest with members. So that was addressed once and for all with that committee with MLAs, and that was put to bed and has not been raised again with us. This council is an absolute trailblazer in relation to climate action. So in effect, you have been advising us in the early days of NILGA's work on this, and very, very proactive. And that has really led to a regional influencing role that you've had with other councils as we work to develop adaptation tools for councils around how they adapt their fleet and their assets. So really there's a massive leadership role, and I know you're very proud of your climate work here in this council. In relation to representation, very quickly, the partnership panel is obviously something that each council has a representative on, and Councillor Christopher Jackson was your representative, and we're very pleased to say that one of the key achievements of the partnership panel in the last mandate was securing the opening of the conversation around the transfer of regeneration again. So the outgoing DFC ministers agreed that that could be explored at official and officer level, and that work is ongoing on your behalf. And then at the appropriate point, then we'll start to have those discussions with you as elected representatives about how you see that being taken forward. And finally, then, I think just on the, I suppose, the NILGA benefits, your council has participated on the a number of campaigns that we have run. Councillor Lillian Senway-Barr has participated in the Be a Councillor, Make It Happen campaign, which is promoting equality and diversity. And also you proactively participate in a number of our showcase events, showcasing best practice at the regional, national and international level. And if we could just move on, there was a short video, but I'm conscious of time, so we'll move on past that if that's okay. So if you just hit forward twice, maybe that should take you forward. And again, and another one again, actually, maybe if that's all right. That should, there, perfect, thank you. So as you can imagine, we've been reflecting extensively with your input over the last 6 to 9 months on the future direction of what we think the sector may need in terms of support, and some early thinking, which I wanted to share with you for your feedback about what direction that may take. So first of all, we know that local government finances are your absolute top priority, and particularly addressing the issues with the potential rate support grants. grants, which are actually really significant, given this the size of the grant in 2021 to where we're talking about potentially for the next year, which is just over £4 million. That's a massive drop. And we really want to influence the transfer of regeneration and secure political agreement on that. And that involves not just working with ministers and MLAs, but directly with political parties to understand what some of the barriers may have been previously and to see if we can address some of those barriers and to move that conversation forward. We want to deliver on more balanced and respectful central government and local government relationships. And we think that needs to be improved. And I suppose a recent example of that, not just at a regional level, but at a national level, has involved our difficulties with how the Levelling Up Fund has been rolled out in this region. So very unhappy generally about the lack of respect for the democratic mandate, any democratic mandate, I should say, never mind local government mandate, but even a mandate at Stormont level. And I think it's very important that we are strong as we move into discussions about Levelling Up 3 potentially, which is already starting with the Department of Levelling Up and Housing and Communities. We want to continue our investment in you in terms of learning and development opportunities, and obviously bring you to help us design what that looks like into the future, because we think that confident elected members will do a much, a better job at really scrutinising and challenging and ensuring that you're delivering for the people that you represent. And finally, we know that the difficulties you're experiencing in recruiting and retaining talent, and NILGA wants to support you all as a sector in promoting the benefits of working in local government and what a unique place it is where you can make a difference. So we'll be working with your HR leads to see if we can work together on a campaign to really promote the sector as an attractive place to work so that you have the best people doing the work for you and supporting your communities. So thank you for the opportunity, Chair, and I'm very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jackson has indicated that he has questions or comments, so I'll go ahead with you first.
Good Chair, and thanks to Matt and Alison. And you'll both be pleased to know that I don't have any questions as such. I just want to take the opportunity on behalf of the Sinn Féin group and with Undera and Strabane to welcome you and to thank you both for the work and support that NILGA have provided members right across the north, and particularly over the last 12 months when there was challenges, huge challenges facing councils. The advice and support from NILGA has been really welcome and second to none. I suppose it's timely that NILGA and it's appropriate that NILGA are the first deputation to come into council in this new mandate. We're looking forward in the next 4 years to move forward in a positive vein. But there's so much uncertainty. So we're trying to progress. We want to deliver first-class council services right across our district. But we're doing that during a period of political instability when there is serious questions around the sustainability of council finances, and on the back of budget cuts. You referred to the rate support grant. There's so many challenges that are facing council, and it's all been done. It's all happening in a climate of political instability. So local councils are only showing town at this minute in time, and it's important that we all work together. So that connective and collaborative approach is essential, and it's more essential now than it's ever been. So the role of NILGA is key to that, and we welcome the presentation. We welcome the commitment for NILGA to support us as elected reps, but to be that voice, that collective voice of elected representatives right across the north, because we certainly need it at this minute in time. So we're on our behalf, we fully appreciate the work that NILGA do, and we're committed to stepping up and doing whatever we can to support NILGA and feed in what we can over the next 4 years. So I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for attending the council again, and we look forward to our special meeting on the 20th of June when we're in a position then to we'll find out who has going to have the privilege to represent this council within the NALGA board. So that's but I just thank you again, and look forward to working with you. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and welcome to our NILGA representatives. Thanks for taking the time to come here today. And as Councillor Jackson said, we do appreciate the support that you give councillors and the coordinating role that you play. And these are very, very challenging times for councils right now. And I think that there's going to be pressure on you to do more for us, and we are happy to work with you along those lines. Obviously, the first thing is the finances of councils are in serious trouble. We had a very difficult year last year where this council raised rates by 8%, cut services by $3.5 million, and raised prices for basic things like swimming. And I think that that's unacceptable in a cost of living crisis. And I'm sure this has been the same in many other councils right across the north. And we have to combine our efforts as councils to put pressure on decision makers who actually hold the purse strings, be they in Stormont and, more importantly, in Westminster, where they could easily increase funding to local councils to assist us as they did during the pandemic, and so that residents in Derry and Strabane district don't suffer and get thrown into deeper hardship, and so that councils like ours are not forced to make decisions that they really shouldn't be taking. So that's the first thing, and I'm sure you're well aware of this. The second is just more specifically about Derry and Strabane Council, because as you will be aware, we're one of the poorer councils, or the less well-off councils across the north. And we've been hit now with another cut to the rate support grant, which we'll be discussing here in the chamber today. And we want to see not just this most recent cut reversed, we want to see the funding goes back to what the original was, which was more than 20 million back in 2008, but that it should be actually increased to what it would be now based on inflation. So that would be more. And I think that every demand when it's first made is unacceptable, and we're told that it's not possible. But I think that we, given the kind of scale of the crisis, we have to set our ambitions high in terms of, so whatever you can do on both those fronts will be, we need your support, and we need a voice campaigning in that direction. And then obviously, look, the unions have rejected the offer, and they will be balloting their members for industrial action. I foresee that the members will agree to industrial action. And to be honest, I mean, from our party's point of view, any worker, any group of worker that isn't receiving an above inflation pay offer has every right to take industrial action. And that is going to put pressure on the council, which means that the campaign and the fight for more funding, we have to change the way that we've been operating, because polite letters to Westminster officials, to the Secretary of State, are not getting the answers. And I think what we have to learn from is what the council workers have done themselves by taking industrial action here in our district. They won something that many people told them they couldn't get. And then we've also seen a brilliant campaign by Sure Start workers and youth services organisations to turn around a set of cuts that some people thought we weren't going to be able to get reversed. So I think that that's our outlook, and NILGA can certainly play a role in being a voice and being a coordinator and supporting those campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chair. And on behalf of the SDLP group, just to welcome our deputation from NILGA this afternoon. I think, as others have said, it's fitting that the Local Government Association are the first deputation that we have at the beginning of this mandate. I think it's also fitting that NILGA play, if you like, a convening role for councils whenever we're heading into quite a difficult period in local government. I think everybody has expressed why and how we're going to be heading into this difficult period. But I think at the far end of it, there's a number of opportunities as well, which hopefully will come before the end of this mandate. All of which, in terms of the difficulty and the opportunities, we need to be prepared for and ready for. We need to have that direct link up with central government and having NILGA there to hopefully open doors and get us in and making sure that those that are making these tough decisions understand that from a local government perspective, the impact that that has, but from this council's perspective as well, that the impact that that will have. As Councillor Harkin has mentioned, we'll discuss the RIT support grant in a short while, and hopefully we will be able to devise some type of a plan of how we intend to fight against that cut as a council. Obviously, then we would need to feed that on through NILGA and make sure that that's spread across. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to be working along with you, and we appreciate the work that has gone on in particularly the last mandate, but over previous mandates as well, to try and make sure that the voice of local government is being heard. Matt, whenever he was speaking, said that we have a job, that NILGA has a job and has a role to give the Northwest a voice. And I absolutely fully agree with that. And I'm sure that every elected representative in the Northwest would bite your hand off at that opportunity. But for us now, it's about the lobbying and the engagement that we can do to make sure that those that are making decisions that will impact on our council understand what that impact is before they're rubber stamping these decisions. In relation to the workers, we'll have to see how that plays out. But once again, you know, and I know Paula had been engaging with you last year, and hopefully, if required, that support will be there this year as well, to bring whatever action that the workforce see appropriate, to make sure that we're working our way through that. As I said, look, I think there's loads of opportunity for us to be working with these, and we'll see who the lucky ones will be on the 20th of this month, who will be appointed to the board. But from our point of view, we look forward to further engagement with these right throughout this mandate, and hopefully we can work together to bring and give the Northwest that voice that it requires. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Martin Allison for joining us today. As others have said, it's totally appropriate that the Northern Ireland Local Government Association is the first to come along to the first actual proper meeting of any of our committees. And I suppose all of the points have been made, and the advantage of NILGA is bringing together like-minded people from across the entire province. And we have a common fight that is taken forward through NILGA. You mentioned Sharon there, and I suppose I have to say, going back to my old Strabane days and the early days of achieving charter status, etc., tremendous work was done by our staff there, and all of our staff working with elected member development and indeed corporate development of council. And going forward through NILGA, I trust and know that whoever our representatives are, they will be working with NILGA for the good of all. And as somebody has, several people have already said, those lucky enough to find themselves going to NILGA will be carrying the best wishes and the support of this district council area to the entire Northern Ireland body. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. That's all my indicated speakers. Do you want to make any comments on it? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, no, go ahead. You're grand.
I'll maybe wrap all the questions or points together, I suppose, if that's okay. Thank you very much for your well wishes. I think the strength of NILGA comes in the fact that it is the voice of 11, not one individual, and that makes it much more difficult for decision makers to ignore that voice as a very important sector for this region. I think the other benefit as well is that NILGA brings a strong cross-party voice. So NILGA focuses very much on bringing all of the party positions to common places. And therefore, whenever any lobbying or representation is undertaken, it is a strong regional voice, but it's a strong political voice as well, which means we're much more effective in our delivery. I think it probably would be remiss of me to say that I think the financial situation is going to be easy. The rate support grant position is very, very concerning. I think I suppose the bigger concern that I have, and I'll be honest with you, is that any additional finance that comes into this region from the UK government, as is possibly being discussed in the media, is still subject to Barnett requirements. And so in the past, John will know this, that additional money has come in, which was destined for local government in England and Wales, but this region, local government never got that money because it was used regionally to deal with other public service pressures. So already you're not getting the benefit of that direct relationship when awards are being made by the UK government. And that is the concern that I have again, that if there is a cash injection, given the general levels of concern about our public services at a regional level, that we may find ourselves in that position again. So you're absolutely right. Strong political lobbying is absolutely key. I think just to give you some assurance that NILGA doesn't just lobby MLAs or permanent secretaries or ministers. We are talking directly to political parties, to the leaders of political parties. We have briefed them on local government finance. We have briefed them on cost of living issues, and we're building consensus directly that way, because we think the best thing to do is to have parties to really think about this in the context of their own policy, because we know parties will go into the chamber at Stormont and they will vote in keeping with their own party thinking and their own party policy. So it's important to get in at that very early stage. I have to say that whilst we will lobby very, very hard on these things, I don't feel that we're in for an particularly easy ride. I don't know if maybe I'm underestimating that, Sean, but I think this is probably going to be one of the most difficult periods in local government, certainly in recent decades. I think, though, that you're right, that opportunities come with all of that. And what we are very focused on, and what Lisa will be taking forward for me, is supporting the 11 councils with a transformation and innovation agenda. And we are focused on bringing support to you that will be a benefit to you and in your councils, external support, access to best practice, access to other councils who have been through similar difficulties, so that you may be able to learn from some of their experiences, some of the mistakes they made, some of the things they did well, because I think ultimately every pound will need to go that little bit further, and we all know that we have to be as efficient as possible with ratepayers' money. So on the Northwest, representing the Northwest, I suppose needs in particular, I think we are acutely aware of regional disparities in NILGA. That's very important just as an organisation, and I have to say the representation regionally in the last mandate was extremely strong on those matters. So it's not a Belfast-centric or a Belfast metropolitan area-centric narrative. It is very much focused on those regional needs, and as well as ensuring that rural needs are addressed, because I know whilst you're a city authority, you also have a large rural population as well. We are preparing responses to the budget EQIA that have currently been issued to supplement the individual responses from your own councils, and we will focus very heavily on the inequalities that are going to be exacerbated, not just by individual budget decisions, but by the cumulative impact of the budget. That is our main concern. Nobody is EQIAing the total budget. Each accounting officer and permanent secretary is doing that for their own department. But if you read the detail, the same groups are being impacted across every single budget area. So the cumulative effect of that will be very difficult. But I feel really assured, and I know Matt will be, unfortunately, he's had to jump off for another meeting at 4:45, but he will be assured of your participation, because as you know, NILGA is a politically led organisation. NILGA and Lisa and I are there to support you and to help and advise, but it is a politically led organisation, and we want good regional representation from all councils. So I look forward to that engagement in the future. Thank you.
If I could just add, especially in that last point of Alison's, that NILGA is a politically led organisation. The officer-led organisations, ALGFO in particular, the Association of Local Government Finance Officers that Alfie chaired last year and sits on this year, supports entirely the work of NILGA, and indeed as does SOLAS. So very close working relationship between the regional officer teams at the specialist level and the work of NILGA, and very aligned in terms of the working. So I think that piece around the 11 councils working together, both at member level and at officer level through those groups, is vitally important.
Thank you, John. And thank you to Alice and Lisa and Matt for that presentation. It was really, really good, really interesting actually in the work of NILGA. So we're going to continue with our business. You can stay if you like. You don't have to.
Really goes well for you.
But thank you very much. Thank you.
All the best.
All right. Oh. Okay, so moving forward, we have one item of chair's business, and that's coming forward from Councillor Harkin. If you want to go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and all the best in chairing the meetings this year. Thanks for, look, I'm sure we've all heard at this point now about the latest cuts to schools. And I think this one is particularly alarming because it's to special needs education. So the Department of Education has decided that they're going to slash the budget from 22 million to 11 million. And I think that this is going to have, impact a lot of children who may not now receive additional support in their schools. It's going to impact the staff, the SEN coordinators. It'll have an overall impact, I think, inside the schools. And I think it's not an acceptable way for the Department of Education to treat children, especially some of the most vulnerable. And I've already been contacted by quite a few parents. Some parents were actually sending me videos of their children before and after they received special education help in the schools. And they're very worried about what the next year is going to bring. And I think I would also worry about the many parents who are hoping that their children could get additional support in schools. And that is less likely now. So I think from a council, from the moment this council gets going in its new mandate, we should send a very strong message to the Department of Education that the cuts are completely unacceptable. We should actually be increasing this budget, not reducing it, based on the scale of need. And as we know, this impacts not one community, but every single community right across our district and right across the north. So I would like to propose that we write to the Permanent Secretary of the Department for Education outlining our concerns and our opposition and actually calling on them to reverse this.
You sent that through?
I will now,
proposal,
yeah.
If you could just...
And that we should also organise a meeting as soon as possible. And it doesn't have to be the same as the NILGA one, a deputation, a meeting where Department of Education officials can hear directly from parents who are going to be impacted, from SEN coordinators and from educators with expertise in special education needs. So I'll forward that right now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. I have a couple of indicated speakers, so I'm just going to go to them while you send that through. Councillor Boggs, you indicated first there.
Pure Mullet, Chair, and thanks to Councillor Harkin for raising it. Can I declare an interest as a teacher, obviously, and as an employee of the Education Authority and the Department for Education? But just to add to what Councillor Harkin has said, there is nobody in schools, there's no parent that can even think about the impact that these cuts are going to have, because any teacher you speak to, any SEN coordinator you speak to, anybody that comes in from EA will tell you the exact same thing. We are already under immense pressure. There are teachers that are working harder than ever to try and support the young people. The thing about these cuts is once these cuts come in, once the money goes, the needs of the children in our care and in the care of teachers right across the north, they remain. And that's the problem. So it's beyond concerning. It's deeply, deeply immoral that you would think that at a time when, as Councillor Harkin says, we should be putting more money into these funds, that we're actually going to start to cut them. It comes in the back of cutting Engage, it comes in the back of cutting Happy Healthy Minds, holiday hunger payments. There is basically nothing left for people to cut, but they keep on coming and coming. So again, just to raise, this is an issue. It doesn't affect nationalists, it doesn't affect unionists, it doesn't affect the others. It affects absolutely every child across the north. The other thing that I find quite stark about these cuts in terms of special educational needs is that we already face a huge issue in our society about supporting adults with special educational needs. And if we don't even have the services to support people when they get to the age of an adult, what injustice have we done them when we haven't given them any support at school? Because that's the reality of where we're going with these cuts. So I think people need to hear it very, very loud and clear. I think parents, SEND coordinators and teachers are making it very, very loud and clear. But it again reiterates the need for us to form an executive and to get back down to working and providing for the people who are most vulnerable in our society and need our support most. So just to add to what Councillor Harkin has says, I think anything that we can do as a council, and I know obviously as a new councillor, it's not something that is directly falls under the remit of council, but if we as local representatives can make those concerns heard for the parents and particularly for the young people, and obviously for the teachers that work in our schools, that the cuts aren't good enough and they need to stop, then I think that's what we need to do. So, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Boggs. Councillor Donnelly?
Good Chair, and just to say that I'm content to second Councillor Harkin's proposal. Once again, the most vulnerable in society are being attacked. There's no other way to put it, and this will have a knock-on effect. It will immediately have a knock-on effect on the parents and carers, and this will have a further effect on vulnerable children and young people as they get older. It's an absolute disgrace and it's not acceptable. I'm sure every councillor in here at this time of the year has been approached by parents of children with additional needs who find it difficult regards the allocation of school places and that, and you can see the stress that this causes the parents and in particular the effect, the very, very negative effect that this will have on the children, whilst all our children will be allocated schools, and a lot of children, they need that stability, they need that routine, they need that sort of assurance. So again, happy to second, and it's not acceptable again, and our serious attack on the most vulnerable in society, as has already been pointed out, that's where we should be nurturing and channeling our finances and help rather than taking away from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Tierney?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that from what we're hearing from Councillor Harkin's proposal, we're happy to support it. The very fact that this has been floated, that's a budget cut to the most vulnerable people in our communities, is extremely alarming. I've been an elected representative for just 10 years, and over that time, we're seeing more and more and more families coming to us looking for help for children who have special educational needs. Whether it's, as Councillor Donnelly touched on, support in schools, support with benefits, or access to the services. There is an increasing demand out there, and it's increasing year on year. And the very fact that the Department for Education are suggesting that they're going to cut it is extremely, extremely confusing to me, because I think Councillor Harkin said, no, this budget should be increased. If anything, it should be one of the ones that's protected and increased year on year as demand requires it to be, not cut. People have already pointed out the benefits that children get from this funding. For all different sorts of reasons and all different sorts of activities throughout the day, they try and help support not only the child, but the family as well, and support them through a very, very difficult time. May it be setting a routine, may it be the simple fact of getting a child to school. It's something that we should not be taking lightly and should not be taken for granted. We also need to show our support to the school teachers and the school staff who, and I know, look, two of my children are at primary school here in the city, and all of the staff, from the principal right down the line, work extremely hard in that school, and I'm sure that it's the same in every other school, extremely hard to support young people and support their families. They need this money to continue doing it. Now, I have no doubt that with the goodwill of those people, that they will do their best if this funding goes to try and continue with that level of support. But they're pushing against the wind, if we're going to be honest. They need the support from the department to be able to support children. And we need to stand up and call it out when we see it. This is wrong. It's absolutely wrong that they're cutting money from children with special educational needs. We need to stand up, and we're happy to support the proposal from Councillor Harkin. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. It was remiss of me earlier on to not welcome you back into the chair. And to thank Councillor Harkin for bringing this to our attention. It wasn't our attention, but he has brought it to the attention of this committee and therefore to council, and that's to be welcomed. When I retired from teaching 25 years ago, special needs was underfunded, and it progressively has been underfunded for decades. It's got to a point we should no longer be talking about cuts, because this is amputation of provision to the service of those vulnerable people in our society. And as has rightly been said, it's not just a matter of special schools and special provision within the school system. There is the adult care as well, and adult learning centres are under extreme and increasing pressures. This cannot go on, and we have to accept that there is a time when, sorry, thus far and no further. It's time to reverse the ongoing cuts that have reached the stage of amputation. I totally support Councillor Harkin and his motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. Councillor Harkin, do you want to sum up on that at this stage? I haven't had anybody that spoke against it, so I think it's more or less unanimous, unless anybody wants to go against it at this stage. No? No? Do you want to, you're happy enough? You're happy enough? Okay, that's been proposed and seconded. We're happy to action that. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harkin. So we'll move forward. Item 7 is the minutes of the Governance Strategic Planning Committee meeting from Tuesday the 7th of March. Are there any matters arising? Alderman Hussey, go ahead.
Matter arising on GSP 44/23. Northern Ireland Housing Executive Staff and the issues around their strike and cost of living pay rise. With your permission, Chair, I'd like to read something that was sent to me by a Northern Ireland Housing Executive employee. It was sent to me on the 30th of May. It may have been a generic letter, I'm not sure, and other councillors may have received something similar, but it reads as follows. I am an essential worker in the Northern Ireland Housing Executive, providing an invaluable public sector service in the community. My trade union negotiated a much-needed cost of living payment earlier this year. This was agreed by my employer in March. I am aware that my employer has progressed this to Department for Communities and Department of Finance. As you're aware, living standards are declining while prices for essentials such as heating and particularly food continue to rise. Soar, with no easement for myself or my family. This is having a devastating impact on me, and I would like you as my elected representative on my behalf to contact DFC and DOF officials directly, as there's no minister in place in either department to ascertain when I will receive this much needed cost of living payment, as more unnecessary delays will only impact me further with dire consequences for myself and my family. I think it is totally unacceptable. Here we have a situation where the unions, the employer, have come to an agreement, and the department, there's nobody there, nobody is at home to actually make the decision. And on the back of that, Chair, I wish to make a proposal that we would write to the permanent secretaries in the two departments. I would ask that proposal be put on screen. I don't know if folk can see that. I gave it on, I can't see it myself, so I'll go here and read it. Council from the Department of Communities Finance. Considering the concern the cost of living payment to changing this time, rather than this, President, if it was just being active, Council further is committed of this cost of living. Is put in for payment to all staff entitled for its receipt.
Do you have a seconder for your proposal? Councillor Minnie?
Chair, I'll second that proposal by Alderman Hussey. Obviously, that's the Alderman Hussey reading the missive they received from his own constituent. And it's clearly that there's an agreement that was reached by the trade unions and the executives, and these payments haven't been made yet. So obviously, this person is one of our constituents, and whatever we can do to try and alleviate that burden, and that's our duty. So the SDLP group is quite happy to support that, and obviously a letter should be sent outlining our dismay at this as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Minnie. Were you finished speaking, Alderman Hussey? I just sort of cut across you.
I have.
Are you done? Aye. You make Councillor Jackson, go ahead.
Chair, and I just like to indicate that from what I've heard of the proposal, we're supportive of it. But I just like to point out that we're about an hour into this meeting, or not even an hour into this meeting, an hour into the first committee, and we've 2 pop-up motions already. And it would have been, if there's actions coming out of meetings, it would be good to have prior sight of potential motions. And now, from what I've heard and of the motion, we're fully supportive of it, but I would ask members to be considerate of everybody else, so we have prior sight of motions and actions. And in this case, we've been consistently supportive of the housing executive workers, and it's only right that we use whatever influence we can bring the Department of Communities or any government body to support local workers here within our city and district. And particularly the housing executive workers who were on prolonged strike action, demanding fair pay and conditions. So in that regard, we're fully supportive of the motion. It just would have been nice to see the wording of any proposed actions coming out of this committee business, of the committee prior to we met. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Jackson, and gets a fair point. It's only fair to everybody else if there's motions coming forward that there's prior sight. Councillor Donnelly, go ahead.
Look, housing executive fully support. I'm actually surprised. I hadn't heard that. And they should be paid. And we can still see the effects of them withdrawing their services for that 7 months. So we can see, and it's right across the entire city and district. We can see, the effects of them withdrawing their labour. But I'm just a wee bit confused regarding, pop-up motions. We've had all this regards full council meetings, and we were told that this is the place, the committees, they have these discussions and that, about, and I think that's what we're doing here. We're having the discussions, and as a result of the discussions, we're putting motions forward that will go to full council. I think it would get a bit messy if we have to sort of submit it to come here to go to full council. Is this not the right venue to do this type of stuff? I could be wrong, but that's my understanding.
I think, and Councillor Jackson can correct me if I'm wrong, it's just that if people are going to bring forward a proposal at committee, it would be nice to have had sight of it in advance. So even to send an email to the committee membership and say, look, I'm bringing this forward, just so people have time to consider it before it's brought on. I think it's just the right thing to do, maybe. If people don't do it, we will work our way through the business, but I just think it's more of a courtesy as opposed to changing the way that we operate as a council. Councillor Harkin, are you looking on there?
Thanks, Chair. Look, any group of workers, that get an agreement for a pay increase or anything else contractually, it should be honoured and met. And if this is happening, it needs to be addressed as quickly as possible. And I think we have to put our weight behind it as a council. And just on the issue about motions, yeah, I don't like pop-up motions, that term. That's just my opinion, because I think it belittles the actual issue, to be honest. And I don't think talking about cutting SEN provision in schools is a pop-up issue or workers not being paid. But I would have sent in my proposal today, and I will in the future if members want that.
Alderman Hussey, we looking to just before?
Just summing up.
I don't think there's from the last one, there wasn't a necessity to sum up. It's not a full motion, it's not full council. It's a proposal that's been put forward and it's been
Just to
seconded.
comment then, if I may.
Go ahead.
Very briefly. My apologies that it has just come, but I did say at the beginning the communication was dated the 30th of May. I didn't get to the second. I wouldn't have had time to submit it through the normal channels as a motion coming to committee. I think it's 14 days or something like that. You have to, whatever it is, I wouldn't have had time. Anyway, it was a matter arising directly out of the minutes of the meeting. But I thank members for the support on an important issue. When something has been sorted out by the unions and the employer that is held up within the department is hardly acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Hussey. And as I say, it's not the formal process of submitting a motion the way it would be to full council. It's more of a courtesy to other members to have sight of any proposals coming forward in advance. So it doesn't have to be 14 days in advance of the meeting. So that concludes that proposal. It was proposed and seconded and no one spoke against it. So we will move on from that. Is there any other matters arising from last month's meeting? Alderman Hussey?
Yeah, GSP 4823. Communication had been forwarded to Royal Mail on the 31st of January. We're still waiting a response. I find that absolutely disgraceful that Royal Mail would treat council in such a way, and I just want to record that. Mayor, I have another matter, GSP 50, but if anybody wants to comment on that.
Does anyone wish to comment on GSP 48 before we move on to the next matter arising? No? Go ahead, Alderman Hussey.
Item 50 and specific to Riverine, I think it would be important at some stage, Donegal County Council are the lead on the Riverine element within the Peace Plus funding scenario. That we would have, again, an update, particularly with new members on committee and on council, that we be brought up to speed at some future date before the recess on progress within that. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, just to advise that an update on Riverine is to be brought into the Northwest Regional Development Group meeting in a couple of weeks' time, in the first instance, and that will then be followed by an update into this committee or indeed ENR, depending on which is more appropriate. But in the first instance, there will be an update report into that group.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to raise any matters arising? No? Okay. We will move forward. So moving on to item 8, which is the year-end financial outturn report for 22-23. I'm going to pass over to Alfie for that.
Thanks, Chair. Members, the report is for you to approve our draft financial outturn position and the associated considerations, including our proposed transfers to reserves for 22-23. This outturn report is obviously the critical component of the larger accounts document that we're under direction to submit to Department for Communities by 30th of June. The other key element, the governance statement, will be reported to this month's audit committee as well in advance of that submission. And then those accounts will subsequently be subject to audit by Northern Ireland Audit Office, with the final audited accounts presented to Audit Committee by 30th of September this year. So in terms of the outturn report, members,
This is the fourth report of the year because we've obviously brought in quarterly reports throughout the year to update members on any issues. And the latest report was presented in March 23 in relation to the Q3 position. So obviously, members, you'll be well aware of the challenges that we've had in the year, the global cost of living pressures, the rising fuel and utility costs, inflation running at over 10%. Construction inflation, pay pressures, and I suppose a risk that hasn't really materialised yet, but is a very real one, is the risk around our rates income, with so much of our non-domestic rating lists, in particular, under appeal through the schools' appeals and also through rising debt levels, which we're keeping an eye on through LPS. So members, thankfully, we were aware of these issues and built a significant contingency reserve to mitigate those, certainly in the short term. So on that basis, members, a detailed draft outturn report is in Appendix 1 and it's summarised in the table in Section 3.1 of the report. So you'll note in that an overspend position, and it's important to stress that that's before utilising any contingency reserves of 6.52 million. And the key elements of that are again set out in the table in Section 3.2 of the report. And the key elements: 2022-23 rate support grant cuts, the need to increase our district fund balance following the recent rates process, severance costs in order to realise the recurrent staff savings that we made as part of the recent rates process, the unbudgeted rises in utility costs, capital project inflation and borrowing costs, as well as the unbudgeted costs associated with pay negotiations. Against this, members, we've had a significantly positive year-end rates finalisation and realised savings across departments due to expenditure control. Another positive is the continued increase in planning and building control income. So thankfully, members, we can fully mitigate that 6.52 million loss position reported as a result of our contingency reserve, and today's report proposes utilising 7.198 million of that fund, which was earmarked to cover a number of specific pressures that contributed to our outturn. The table in Section 3.3 shows the current contingency reserve position, as well as an updated assessment of our forecast unbudgeted pressures as we move into 23-24. You will note that the previous forecasts at the rates time have increased, mainly as a result of the next item in today's agenda, the 23-24 rate support grant cut. So on that basis, members, we're proposing that a sum of 600k additional is added into the contingency reserve so that that cut is fully mitigated in the current year. It is worth pointing out, members, that that's the known risks at this point. We're obviously, there's a number of letters we're receiving at the minute from central government in relation to wider funding cuts that we're currently assessing. So those are currently unmitigated risks: good relations funding, labour market partnership funding, affordable warmth. And so reports will come back to the relevant committee as those cuts are better understood. So members, in summary, I suppose the summary position is set out in 3.6 of the report. Current deficit, 6.52 million. We're proposing in the report to take 7.198 million from our contingency reserve. Against that, we're proposing to transfer 600 grand back into our contingency reserve to cover mainly the rate support grant developments. And that leaves us with a small sum of 78k, which we're proposing just to keep within our district fund balance. And that keeps us, members, within the Department for Community parameters of between 5 and 7.5% of net expenditure. So members, the recommendation is that you approve the year-end financial outturn position, including the bullet pointed items, the 6.52 million overspend position offset by application of 7.198 million funds from a contingency reserve, the transfer of the 600k to your contingency reserve, reducing our remaining surplus to 78k and leaving a balance in the reserve of 6.02 million to be carried into 23-24. And that small remaining surplus is kept within our district fund balance, which remains within DFC guidelines. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Alfie, for that report, which is very detailed. Is there any members that wish to speak to this item? No one has indicated at this stage. If not, can I go ahead, Councillor Jackson?
Well, I just want to, on behalf of Sinn Féin, thank Alfie for the report. And there's, I suppose we are in a fortunate position where we have had that contingency reserve in place, because if we didn't, it would be in a dire position. But there are significant challenges coming at us, which are unbudgeted, and there's, and well, I suppose just in, whilst we support the recommendations as contained within the report, we do see the necessity of that finance working group being re-established and meeting on a regular basis again as soon as possible. And I know, John, you had indicated that first meeting is imminent. So these type of discussions will be had in much more detail within the financial working group. But in relation to the recommendations that are in front of us, we're fully supportive of them, and we're looking forward to working with officers to overcome the challenges that are coming at us in terms of council budgets and finances. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, John, as we update there on the finance working group, and then I'll bring in Councillor Farrell. Is that okay?
Thanks, Chair. And just to update members that we will be sending out information this week with regard to projected dates for a number of the working groups. Finance working group has been prioritised, and there's a projected date that is provisionally in members' diary for the day after the special council meeting on the filling of external and internal bodies. So I think that's on the 20th. The finance working group is scheduled to take place on the 21st. So it's a fairly strong indication of how important the work of that group will be going forward. But we'll get an email out to all members to make sure that those who are considering joining those groups can block out time in their diaries. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Farrell, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I'm happy to second the proposal. And like Councillor Jackson, we agree that this council is in a is under major financial pressure. We just came out of one really bruising and challenging rates process, and it looks like we're going into another straight away. So the sooner the better. We are lucky that we have a contingency reserve that stood us in good stead last year, and we've got a very small surplus. So thank you, Alfie. Thanks to the entire team at council for getting us there. But it looks like the contingency that carries over into this financial year, it could be exhausted. And we haven't even looked at the next year's. We don't have contingency for that. We have 6 million carrying into this year. We have unbudgeted pressures. It could be gone at the end of the year. We haven't even looked at the next financial year. So it's going to be a difficult process. We're not out of the woods yet, but we need government support. And the next item here is about labour market partnerships. It's about the rate support grant. We need Stormont to work for us. We need Stormont to start paying its fair share, because at the minute, people across this city and district cannot fund all the services that are required here. And we need government to step in, and we need it immediately.
You, Councillor Farrell. Councillor Harkin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Alfie, for the comprehensive report and the logic of it as well. Obviously, as everybody has said, we're not in great financial shape, and there's going to be a lot of challenges coming down the line. So for the record, look, I'm not happy to endorse this today. I want to have a meeting with Alfie between now and the full council meeting. I wasn't able to do that prior to the meeting today because obviously we've just received a new mandate, and I didn't know I was going to be on this committee until last night. So that's what we're going to be doing.
That being said, you're not voting against it, just so do I need to take a day of vote, or you're just abstaining on it, or?
Yeah, well, look, I've
Essentially,
stated my
it's been
position, so you don't
proposed,
need a
seconded,
vote.
so-
Yeah,
Sorry?
I've stated my position, so I don't think a vote's necessary.
That's okay, no bother. That is what it is. So that's been proposed and seconded. Christopher proposed it and Rory seconded.
Sorry, I'm just not clear. Is it unanimous or is it one abstention?
That's why I was clarifying if it's an abstention.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Everybody else content?
Everybody else okay with that? Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So we'll move forward and you can talk to Alfie about your meeting. So the next item on the agenda is the item 9, which is the rates support grant and other central government funding cuts. And I'm going to pass back to Alfie for that.
Thank you, Chair, again. So members, the purpose of the report, threefold. Firstly, to advise you of the correspondence which we've received from Department for Communities in respect of rate support grant and also labour market partnership funding cuts. Secondly, to advise you on the implications of those proposed cuts. And finally, to agree Council's response to the EQIA issued by Department for Communities in respect of the cuts. Members, the rationale and need for rate support grant has probably been set out a number of times in Council in the past, but I think most people will be well aware that it's to support those less wealthy, more rural and more deprived councils who, without any policy intervention, would pay a very significantly higher percentage of their property values and rates. The key grant to make sure that that's the case is rate support grant, and 7 councils receive it on that basis to varying degrees, with this council having the highest entitlement at 20.05%. Unfortunately, you'll be well aware the grant quantum is not protected in legislation, and as a result you can see how the grant has been eroded over a number of years from its peak level of 20.5 million to a proposed level of 4.9 million for the year ahead, which essentially, members, renders it meaningless in terms of achieving the policy objective. So we've also received correspondence from Department for Communities, which is attached in relation to local labour market partnership funding, which advises that the department will be unable to fund that beyond the first quarter of this year, although there are obviously discussions ongoing to try and reverse that. So both pieces of correspondence, members, make reference to an EQIA, and today's report provides a proposed response. Michael's going to take you through the key equality elements of that, but just before that, I'll just quickly highlight the financial implications. So whilst we did anticipate some level of cut at the time of the rates estimates process, it certainly wasn't to this magnitude. And you'll be aware from the previous report that we have had to ring-fence significant further funding within our contingency reserve to make sure that we can cover the shortfall in the current year. So we are in the short term okay, and that's basically the current financial year. But from a rates perspective, members, if that grant was to remain at 4.9 million, that will be a 1.76% immediate pressure on our rates, and there's a potential that the 4.9 million would be reduced further. Members, just another point to make. I'm not sure if you're aware, but Mid-Ulster Council have, in advance of these cuts, taken a judicial review against the department in relation to the rate support grant cut applied during the previous year. And obviously, as soon as the council we would be supportive of that position. So members, the key issue at hand is that we have a very short time frame to respond to the EQIA. If our response is to be considered, it has to be submitted by tomorrow. So obviously it doesn't have the luxury of getting to full council. So I suppose we're seeking your endorsement today to submit the response, and Michael will take you through some of the key points within that. Thank you.
Michael, John just wants to make a wee comment before you come in, if that's okay.
Members, I just wanted to point out a small figure in Alfie's report that we have relayed to yourselves as well. So I know that members are all very much on the same page with regard to this proposed cut to the rate support grant. But again, it's a message that we keep trying as officers to convey to senior civil servants with regard to the importance of it. It's not just the actual grant and the impact of the cut of the grant itself. As Alfie has said, the rate support grant was previously in excess of 20 million, is now down to less than 5 million. That's a 15 million pound cut over the years. We receive about 20% of that, which is 3 million. That is bad enough. But when we can utilise recurrent funding to draw down loan charges to fund our capital aspirations, that's the equivalent of withdrawing 48 million pounds out of our capital budget. And when you think of our key strategic aspirations and the necessity to upgrade, for example, our strategic leisure estate, and the challenge that we have in trying to fund that, taking 48 million pounds out of that capital budget is the impact potentially of these cuts to the rate support grant. So it's often phrased in terms of it's a 20% cut, it's 1.245 million, or it's 3 million, but it's the multiplier effect of that and the impact that that potentially has on the delivery of frontline services to our citizens. That is the key issue with regard to that, and impacts hugely on our strategic funding strategy to enable some of these strategic projects to be delivered. And the other point to make that I think was discussed and made by Alison from NILGA, it's the cumulative impact of all of these cuts. It's what we're receiving at the moment is department by department over the various weeks, the impact of various elements of these cuts. The EQAAs that are emanating are on a departmental by departmental basis. We need to respond cumulatively with respect to all of this, which is the piece of work that Michael's been leading on. And thirdly, during the period where these cuts were we're becoming aware of these cuts, we've had to take some initial measures to try to ensure that we protect staff that are potentially impacted by some of these cuts. And one of those measures is tighter vacancy control. So it's not a freeze in vacancy control, but certainly tighter vacancy control to make sure that staff who potentially become at risk, and I say that word very strongly at this moment, potentially, we do everything we can to protect those staff. And we've also introduced a halt on all non-essential maintenance work until we understand the implications in year of these further cuts. So it's a few important points just to highlight from Alfie's report there, and a couple of immediate implications that we need to put in place to ensure that we can deal with these matters as effectively as possible. So, Chair, if that's okay, we'll pass back to Michael.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Alfie, for introducing this. So I briefly just want to take you through a number of the documents that have been sent out to you, primarily Appendix 3 and 4. But by way of background, as already been said, the DFC, Burn for Communities, already issued an EQAA for a response. Unusually, they've specified they want it back within by tomorrow for the first element of this, and all of the situation or context of it is quite unusual. That's I think the best word I could use for it. Is there anything what I would say? Unusual in the least. So the EQA is out there. Normally what we'd be doing at this stage is arguing about the fact that there were adverse impacts and what they might be, and it would affect lone parents and people with disabilities and things like that. They've already said all that in the EQA. They're saying we know that. Tell us what the mitigation should be. But if you're looking at the cuts that we're looking at, there are no mitigations. The money isn't there, you know. So our response has been, as a council, around the fact that if you take all of these elements singularly, they're bad enough. But if you combine them in terms of the context of Derry City's plan as a council, the low incomes and the wealth, the lack of wealth that exists here compared to other councils, they're much, much worse. And that's the way this has been done. Like, it's been sliced. You're getting the DFC, EQA, we're getting one from TEO in terms of their cuts, and that looks to be the methodology that they're applying. So in a sense, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. What we've tried to do is set out a case within Appendix 3 I'll come to that in a minute, a comprehensive, robust and case across all elements, and saying, looking at these, as I said, individually doesn't give you a sense of what the impact will be in a council such as this, particularly around the rate support grant. And there's a technical issue around that, which I'll come back to, which is Appendix 4. People may wonder what that is. As Alfie's already said, Mid-Ulster Council have been given leave to take a judicial review. I spoke to the Quality Unit in DFC last Thursday, trying to figure out what was going on. And they said, no, there's leave, right, Deputy, they've got leave for it. So it's proceeded to a certain degree. So they must think there's some grounds to it. The complicated matters is what they're having adjudged, as it were, is what the December 2022 screening exercise. And I'll come back to that in a minute, but just keep that in your head a minute. So that's what's going on. No screening was done for what's happening in this terms of cuts. That screening hasn't happened, and the Quality Unit person told me that we're not doing the screening until we get the responses from councils and the wider public. And then we look at an EQA then. It's bizarre in terms of the methodology and in terms of the process. But we're contesting all of that within this document, as you will see. We've had a chance to look at it. So it comes across a broad range of services. One of the issues with the rate support grant is because it's not ring fence, it's very difficult to say it will impact upon this, and this, but it'll impact right across all council services. For us, because of the low level of income and the fact that we've been trying to keep prices down in leisure and recreational to encourage activity and things like that, it has a greater impact here than it might have elsewhere. So we have a number of grounds where we've come back to DFC and challenged. But to turn into the screening issue now, just deal with that. So the screening won't be completed until the end of this process. We've challenged the screening process in itself. I'll read this out. You'll see it there in yellow. So they screened out in December 2022. The rate support grant is something that would be subject to an EQAA, which again is strange behaviour. And the rationale for it. So once it's screened out, there's no requirement then on the legislation to carry out an EQA. But if you look at the page 3 of the document, Appendix 4, which is highlighted, you'll see it says it's not to be subject to an EQA. So that was the decision. And then they're asked, why is that the case? If one or two may not be subject to an EQA, please provide details of the reason why. The budget allocation in respect of rate support grant will impact district councils' funding decisions, and they are, as public authorities, responsible for assessing the impact of any decisions taken. At a departmental level, no adverse impact can be identified at this stage. So that again is a very strange statement. They're saying it because it's very, very high level, and we will be distributing this money to councils. It's up to them, and they go on then to say later on in terms of the highlight section. So it's up to council. So they throw it all back on council in terms of a Section 75 EQA analysis of what the impacts will be. So they say the changes will occur at district council level, which is too general to be able to make any assertion about an impact on a specific group. Each council is a statutory authority with an equality duty in its own right. We've challenged that within the document, within the Appendix 4 document, as you will see. We've challenged it right through. We think it's a very strange way to do things. It doesn't fit within the legislation, we do not think. But Mid-Ulster, who are contesting the December issue, it'll probably be included. It'll probably have an impact on what's going to happen now this year. So that's that. So we just want to move now to Appendix 3. So obviously we've already heard about the labour market partnerships, which, as I say, have been paused in July. So again, given the importance of skills and linking people with employment and things like that, that's very, very detrimental to Section 75 groups, such as lone parents who are more likely to be not employed, older people who are less likely to be employed, and young people from 16 to 24 who we know from the audit of inequalities are also more likely to be unemployed or not in employment. So we've gone through, if you look at the Appendix 3, I'm going to just go through the questions at this stage. You'll see our answers there. And I think we've been comprehensive and robust in our response, but we're content to take any comments today, and they can be changed before it's submitted tomorrow if we get approval today. Are there any data needs or issues in relation to any of the Section 75 equality categories that have not been identified in Section 6 of the EQA consultation document? If so, no, what are they? And can you provide details? So you'll see some, we talk about their economic activity and inactivity and religion. And the fact that the LMP will have a detrimental impact and adverse impact on those who are lone parents and others, those with disabilities who are less likely to be employed, and the differential in employment in terms of those who have disabilities is very, very large in this council area. So question 2, are there any adverse impacts in relation to any of the Section 7 equality groups that have not been identified in Section 7? And again, we've taken each of those. But again, the more general point is that if these things are taken individually, it minimises the impact when you look at it. We're saying when you take it all together, if you look at all the other cuts that we're seeing, if you're looking at the increase in food inflation, so food inflation for those in lower incomes is around 20%, because food inflation amongst staple goods is much, much higher than other products. So anybody on fixed income and low income is suffering disproportionately, and this is the point we've made. So moving on then, if we go through, there's a series of graphs there which you want to look at, but I can flick through them, but it's everything that we know to expect in terms of the metrics for Derry City Expanded State Council, in terms of employment, unemployment. There's a graph there of 15 years showing what that is. Showing the next graph shows the differential across councils, which is, as you can see, is the highest in Northern Ireland, continues to be so in terms of claimant count. And income levels were the lowest. And employment deprivation, the highest in Northern Ireland. So we've everything that we expect. Median income were the worst. So economic inactivity, again, which is a focus for a lot of people, we do very, very badly. And that has continued to be the case. So this is the context within which these cuts are happening. So if council is cutting interventions, whether it's labour market partnership or even trying to keep people active through use of recreation and leisure to keep them through this challenging process, these will all be impacted upon, and that's the case they've made. So the final question is, question 3, please state what action you think could be taken to reduce, to eliminate any adverse impacts. We basically says stop the cut and refund the cut from the past in terms of what it was a few years ago, because we as a council need it. I mean, the more general point is that if you're in a council in the east and you have large headquarters there, you have a lot of large businesses, then the rates that you're getting are, you don't need a rate support grant because the income is there already, because you have a lot of highly affluent individuals working there. Whereas here, as you know, we're struggling because of the low income levels. So we then asked any other comments. The version that you got of this has had some additions to it since. So we're looking at we're also raising the issue of the community support program as well. Now, that's not within the document, but we're basically highlighting that and saying, do not be cutting that. Do not be cutting. You've already talked about the affordable warmth, that there'll be no new applicants in September for that. That's going to have an adverse effect here, where people are in much higher levels of fuel poverty than anyone else in Northern Ireland. We also have mentioned there about the rural area and how that will affect people who much have lower incomes again, have difficulty in accessing employment and difficulty in accessing services. So if you start cutting back on advice, and the fact that the Social Security agency are talking about closing their office for a day a week, that's where people go for help and assistance. So that's the 2 documents. The advice centres as well. We've in case the worry would be in a few months' time that in year they're short of money and they start cutting all their services, and that they start cutting in this council area because they can. Okay, thank you.
And Chair, just through you, to say that there's been a huge amount of work done on this in a very short period of time to try to collate this. But we're very aware, as Michael has said, of the compressed timeframes within which councils are being asked to respond at a time when councils weren't sitting. And clearly there's a little bit of a governance issue here in respect of a document that's before you today, that we need to get something into the system tomorrow that obviously is, this is simply a committee of council, it won't be endorsed by full council. So it's just something I'd ask for your steer on, because our certainly the officer suggestion here is that it would be better to submit something tomorrow and get it into the system with a strong letter with a proviso on it that this is an interim response from council, that due to the circumstances, obviously, the council needs to meet to properly consider this, and that there will be a further more detailed, more rounded response coming from council in due course. But something to bookmark into the system tomorrow that council has given it its initial consideration rather than no response at all by tomorrow. But clearly that's something we'd like a steer from yourselves on today.
John, Councillor Farrell, you'd indicated first.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And on behalf of the SDLP, we support the recommendations and the pack. And I'd like to thank Michael and Alfie and whoever for their efforts to date in pulling this all together. And it's important that we get a response on tomorrow. We don't want any government department to say, well, he didn't respond to the deadline, therefore we're ignoring anything you have to say. So you have our support in getting something issued tomorrow. We'll leave it up to the officer, the team to determine what way that happens, but we need to have a response with DFC tomorrow. You know, the cuts to the labour market partnership and the cuts to rate support grant should be resisted at every opportunity. They're wrong on so many levels. You know, the labour market partnership, it was launched last year and it was meant to improve employability, create jobs, drive down unemployment, drive down economic inactivity, raise incomes, raise disposable income. And all of a sudden they're going, no, we're not doing that anymore, which is a disgrace, especially when you look at the economics of the Northwest. You know, we need more support and it's just being cut from underneath our feet. In terms of the rate support grant, like this one, it makes no sense at all. You know, this grant was initially launched in 2008 and the whole purpose was to help poorer councils deliver services because they don't have the rates income of councils in the East. In 2008, it was over £20 million. Now it's less than £5 million. In 2008, our share of that pot was £4.1 million, and it's less than £1 million now. And an inflationary uplift should have been applied. I've done some maths on this. If inflation was applied from 2008, that £20 million pot would be worth over 31 million now, and our share would be 6.25 million. And we're getting less than £1 million. So that's a gap. That's a hole of £5.25 million that we're losing out on a year that could be used to fund Templemore Sports Complex, Riversdale, a host of capital projects, or to pass on savings to the ratepayer. And the message we're getting from Stormont is that poor councils don't matter. And that is clear from the action that they have taken over the years, where they have cut and cut and cut and cut. And it needs to stop now. So we support the recommendations. I've got a proposal in terms of writing to the permanent secretary. It is a pop-up, so I apologise in advance. So we need to write I know we don't have a communities minister. I wish we did have a communities minister. I wish we had any sort of minister at all, but we don't. So the proposal, and I'm going to send it to Paula now once I finish speaking, we need to write the permanent secretary to express our disappointment at these cuts. And we need to insist that any future communities minister who comes on the post, that they need to restore the rate support grant to its original level. They need to protect the quantum of the grant and legislation so it's actually ring-fenced, and that inflationary uplifts are applied on an annual basis. So it grows as the costs grow, so it can't be just reduced at the whim of some minister or at the whim of some civil servant. We need protected. You know, our ratepayers need protected because the system we've got here is a farce at the minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farrell. Councillor Heaney.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Alfie and Michael for this very concerning report. It is something that's just something hard to comprehend how this grant has been further cut once again. I think as John once put it, it's just been bled out to the point where it's become extremely difficult for councils like ourselves to function, never mind to deliver first-class services. So in terms of Councillor Farrell's points, which a lot of which I agree with, I think we would content to support his proposal also of writing it. But, and I'll let you deal with this proposal first, but I would have a further proposal on top of that, which is that given like what Michael has outlined in relation to this, and obviously we're almost not to say, but Sinn Féin also support the responses and want to see them put in as requested. And the bizarre fashion that this has all been done is also very concerning. But that we think we should also be joining the legal action taken by an Ulster, that this council should join that action. Also, we cannot see how there is not equality impacts impacting here, has outlined. So once we've dealt with this, I think we'll put that forward, which can go for ratification in full council if passed. Thanks.
Okay. Would you just send out your proposals through to Paula so she has it? Is that okay?
Get it done somewhere.
Aye.
Second.
And Connor, were you seconding this Councillor Farrell's proposal or?
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Happy to second, no bother. Councillor Harkin, you had indicated you wanted to speak there as well.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, to thank Michael and Alfie and whoever else worked on this report, and because it lays out the issue, and just I back the conclusions, which is that the rate support grant needs to be restored to its original level, and that we need to stop or reverse the plan to end funding for the labour market partnership. And it's clear that the DFC are taking a wrecking ball to our council on behalf of the Tory Secretary of State, and that the adverse impacts that you've outlined, Michael, we'll feel it in terms of council finances, but the people across our district and all communities will feel it even more. Because it's going to mean, a loss of further services, and all the good work that the council provides, all the good work the council does, is at risk because of these decisions. So I think it's urgent that we get a response in tomorrow, and we can obviously strengthen it as we get more input from councillors and other people with an idea of what this will mean if the cuts go through. So that's the first thing. And then in regards to Councillor Farrell's proposal, absolutely support it, that the funding should be ring-fenced, and that's the problem here. That Stormont has never fully agreed to acknowledge regional disparity, the legacy of regional disparity. And so this is something that could be overturned. It could go up or down year in, year out. And it was never really a serious effort at addressing the imbalances that Stormont has put in place. So I think that the funding needs to be ring-fenced. It should go back to the original level, and that it should be increased based on inflation. That would be a fair way to do it. And I agree as well with Councillor Heaney's proposal that we should join up with Mid-Ulster Council in the judicial review. And that should be coordinated, if possible, right across all 7 councils that are going to be impacted, because I think we need to send the strongest possible message possible to the DFC that we're not going to tolerate this. And it also brings into question the role of government, because government is supposed to step in when there is a crisis to help councils. And what we see right now is that government is only stepping in when they're bailing out big corporations. That's the only way that they're intervening. Because if we were a corporation right now, we wouldn't be getting cut, we would be getting helped. And I think that that is, utterly hypocritical. And I think we have to highlight this as well, because the stakes have grown even greater in terms of even the cuts that have been put through last year. So thank you for the work on this. And, I think we need a strong, immediate response.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. So I think it's sort of been unanimous in the recommendations being supported, and also in Councillor Farrell's proposal being supported across the chamber. We'll move forward now on to Councillor Heaney's proposal.
Chair, I think.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Just on consultation with the chief executive there, just in terms of some of the legal questions around the proposal, I'm happy to amend it to that we would explore joining the legal action. And hopefully by the time we get the full council for ratification, that will have been explored and we know can that word be removed.
You, Councillor Minnie, go ahead.
I'll second that proposal by amendment by Councillor Heaney. I had an opportunity in the interlude there to speak to the city solicitor about it, and obviously there was some legal questions raised that I was interested in, and that between now and full council could be canvassed and brought back to us, because obviously there may be certain legal points that might cause difficulty between us becoming notice parties or joining as notice parties in relation to the proceedings, which I would like addressed anyway, but and I think it's probably a more common sense approach at this juncture. Thank you, Chair.
Does anyone else wish to speak on that proposal before? Councillor Donnelly, go ahead.
When we say join it, do we mean like put our shoulder to their wheel or have a separate, we take 1, 2, or I assume that it's join theirs and give them whatever help and support we can?
Yes, that's my understanding of the process. Obviously, Philip's here and he can view himself, but we've joined, or others have joined us in legal actions before, so it's just one and the same action. It's not a separate case.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's essentially the position in relation to the matter. The council would be making an application, if it did proceed with this, to intervene in the proceedings. It's essentially sits to one side of the party and provides information which is useful to the court. There are certain restrictions in relation to that, and that first of all you have to seek leave to be allowed to intervene in relation to the matter, and secondly you have to satisfy the court that you will be able to provide a valuable contribution that can't already be provided by the parties that are involved in it. In this instance, the arguments that we are making may be identical to those arguments that would be making by Mid-Ulster, and the court might not think that there would be a contribution that we could make, but we'd need to look at that. And certainly this motion as it's currently worded would allow us the opportunity to take some time to consider that position.
I would assume that we would be joining in and saying, the levels of inequalities here, and, and adding that argument, they say, we top all the wrong risks and all of that, and therefore that's why we need, and that's why we're joining it, and that's why we need this granted. Yeah.
Just picking up on Councillor Donnelly's point, I'm not aware of the complete detail of Mid-Ulster's, other than that they've taken a review on 4 grounds, and one of those grounds is equality. So we'll explore that further between now and full council, and but I don't know if we'll be able to bring anything new to it, but obviously happy to support.
Okay, so that's been proposed and seconded, and everyone seems to be content that we explore it as an option. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move forward. As I said earlier, the original recommendations have been supported, so we can get a response on the DFC tomorrow. Whatever officers feel is appropriate to do that. So moving forward, item 10 is the mayoral office policies, and I'm going to pass to Ellen for that.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek members' approval for the following updated policies or documentation, namely the asset elimination policy, the mayoral hospitality and gifts policy, and the guide to mayoral support services and civic protocols also part of that. The report itself identifies that we do periodically review policies, and each year at the end of a mayoral term, we take the opportunity again to refine the existing policies. So you can see under section 3, the proposed amendments and the rationale that is being put forward. There's no real big substantive issues that I would like to draw members' attention to. So the recommendation is that, subject to your comments, that the updated policies are approved. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Would anyone like to? Alderman Hussey, go ahead.
It's just a quick query. Requests for receptions, whether civic or mayoral, requests for illumination. Under this policy, are we being told they all go through the mayor's office? They don't come to the chamber, is that correct?
You, Chair. The majority, we would hope that would go through the mayor's office, because the mayor has to give approval. In the context of anything that comes through the council body, then it's a council approval. So there, 2 options are available. But as I say, generally we would encourage members to put it through the mayor. Thank you.
Subsequent to that, that if it comes through the chamber, it has no implication on the mayor's budget, whereas if it goes through the mayor's office, it has an implication on the mayor's budget. Is that correct?
Chair, ideally, it has no implication on either budget, because lighting up the corporate headquarters buildings, both in Strabane and Derry, has very limited financial implications. It's only when we go beyond that there are financial issues.
Okay, does anybody else wish to speak on that item? In the absence of anybody wishing to comment, can I have a proposer or seconder? Proposed by Councillor Farrell, seconded by Councillor Duffy. Thank you. So moving on, item 11 is the Rural Needs Annual Monitoring Report, and it's back to Ellen for that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report presents members with details of the Council's Rural Needs Annual Monitoring Report for 22-23, and it seeks obviously your comments and approval for the same. By way of background, this again, as I say, is a requirement under the Rural Needs Act, Northern Ireland 2016, and that particular legislation puts the responsibility on public authorities to have due regard to rural needs, and also to monitor and report on the due regard duty and how it's been exercised. So as I say, in terms of our obligations, basically, we have to compile the report, which is included for your consideration, include information in the Council's annual corporate report, and obviously then send the information to DERA. So the recommendation in front of members today is that, subject to your comments, that we submit the Rural Needs Annual Monitoring Report, which is at Appendix 1. The only other thing I would sort of highlight is that this is normally due to be submitted by the 30th of June, in which case it would be fully ratified by Council. But for some reason this year, the deadline has been brought forward. So we have advised DERA that we will be submitting the report by the request 20th of June now, but it is subject to ratification by Council. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Ellen. Would anyone like to speak in relation to this item? No. In the absence, could I get a proposer? Who was up there? Sorry, Councillor Farrell proposed and Councillor Minnie seconded. Thank you.
Councillor Tierney.
Councillor
Tierney and Councillor Minnie.
Councillor Tierney and Councillor Minnie. Sorry. You mumbled a wee bit, I couldn't hear you. So that moves us on to item 12, which is the diversity ambassadors and councils. Back to Ellen for that item.
Again, through you, Chair, this report advises members of the Equality and Diversity in Local Councils initiative and seeks members' views in respect of the number of members to be nominated as diversity ambassadors. There is correspondence in the pack that members would have received and suggesting that there's potentially an opportunity to have 1 to 3 elected member ambassadors from each council. And obviously there's officer support and representation as well, which we will identify at a later date. In order to facilitate the nomination process to this outside body at the special council meeting on 20th of June, members' views are sought on the number of nominations that will be put forward. And obviously there'll be training to support ambassadors and nominees are therefore requested by the 30th of September. I would advise members that in the past we had 1 elected member ambassador. I don't think the initiative was particularly proactive in its latter years, but they're obviously regenerating it. So again, I would very much appreciate members' views on the numbers that you want to put forward this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Councillor Jackson, go ahead.
Good Chair, and thanks, Sean. From our perspective, given the importance of increasing diversity within our council, we would be supportive of nominating 3, or having 3 people nominated at the meeting on the 20th. Thank you. I'm happy to make that a proposal.
Thank you. And would anyone else like to speak on that? We have a proposal. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Minnie? Okay. So the proposal is that we would nominate 3 at the special council meeting on the 20th. Okay. Perfect. So moving forward, items 13 to 19 are all open for information. I'm going to take them together. If anybody wants to speak on a specific issue, just let me know which item. Councillor Boggs, go ahead.
Just, I suppose, Chair, on item 14 in relation to the A5 Western Travel Corridor, just to, I suppose, particularly as a new council, just to put on record the thanks to the Director for Business and Culture for attending the inquiry, and just re-emphasising, restating again the position of council, that it's imperative that we see the public inquiry is now come to a close, but it's imperative that we see the next stage of that hopefully the A5 will go ahead. But just to put on record, just to thank the Director for attending and putting once again council support under that inquiry and for the responses that council submitted as well.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to raise anything under open for information items? No. Can I get a proposer to go into confidential, please? Councillor Farrell and Councillor Minnie has seconded, so we'll just give it a wee second to her.